It started as a joke, just a stupid, harmless joke. My friend Mia had been raving about this ancestry DNA kit she took last summer, claiming she found out she's 12% Scandinavian. She's been making Viking warrior jokes ever since. I laughed it off, but curiosity got the best of me. Why not find out if I had some exotic heritage too? I imagined bragging about being part royalty or something equally ridiculous. The kit came in the mail in a sleek little box, and I swabbed my cheek while binge-watching some trashy reality show. It felt like an errand, like brushing my teeth or paying a bill. Forgettable. Routine. Weeks passed, and I nearly forgot about it. Life hummed along in its usual rhythm. Morning coffee, work, dinner with my parents every Sunday. Just normal, boring life. Until the email came. Your DNA results are ready. I clicked the link without hesitation, expecting pie charts and maps. But what I found wasn't that. Not even close. You share no DNA with your listed family members. I read the sentence 3 times, then a 4th. My hands started to shake so badly I dropped my phone. No DNA, I whispered aloud, as if saying it would make it make sense. This had to be a mistake. Some glitch in their system, a typo maybe. But the words were there, black and white, staring back at me like an accusation. I grabbed my laptop and logged into the account, digging deeper into the results. But there it was again, clear as day. I wasn't biologically related to my mom, my dad, or my younger brother Sam. My head spun, and I thought I might throw up. "Are you okay, honey?" Mom's voice floated in from the kitchen, calm and familiar. She was probably making tea, humming some tune she half remembered from the 80s. Everything about her felt so ordinary, so comforting. Except that it wasn't. Not anymore. I couldn't tell her. Not yet. Instead, I grabbed my coat and left the house, mumbling something about needing fresh air. It took me 3 days to work up the courage, 3 days of tossing and turning, barely eating, my thoughts spiraling like a broken record. Every time I looked at my mom or dad, I felt like a fraud, like I was lying by omission. So, on the 3rd night, I called them into the living room. I sat on the couch, my laptop open in front of me, the DNA results pulled up on the screen. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice shaking. Mom sat beside me, her brow furrowed with concern. "What is it, sweetheart?" Dad stood by the armchair, crossing his arms. "You're not pregnant, are you?" he joked, trying to lighten the mood. I didn't laugh. "No, Dad, it's not that." The words came out in a rush. "I took this DNA test, just for fun, to see where we came from. But the results, they said I'm not related to you." To either of you. For a moment, the room was silent. Then Mom blinked, her lips parting like she was about to say something but couldn't find the words. Dad frowned. "What do you mean, not related? That's impossible." "I mean exactly that," I said, my voice cracking. "It says we don't share any DNA. At all." Mom's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. "No, that can't be right. There must be a mistake." "That's what I thought," I said, tears welling up. "But I checked and double-checked. This is real." Dad started pacing. "This is nonsense. Those kits aren't reliable. They mix things up all the time." But Mom wasn't so sure. Her face had gone pale, her expression distant. "Wait," she whispered. There was something." "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart pounding. She shook her head, like she was trying to shake off a memory. "When you were born, there was some confusion at the hospital. They mixed up some of the babies in the nursery. But they brought you back to us, and everything was fine." "Was it?" My voice came out louder than I intended. "Was it fine? Because this says it wasn't. This says I'm not your kid." Mom started crying then, big, heaving sobs that made my chest ache. Dad came to her side, wrapping an arm around her, but his face was like stone. "We're calling the hospital," he said finally. "We're getting answers." I nodded, wiping at my face. But in my gut, I already knew the truth. The life I thought I knew was over. The call to the hospital felt like ripping a bandage off a wound that was still bleeding. Dad was the one to make it. He insisted, his voice firm and unyielding in a way I'd rarely seen. Mom just sat on the couch, clutching a tissue and staring at nothing. I hovered nearby, arms wrapped around myself like I could hold all the pieces together. My thoughts raced faster than I could catch them. What if they didn't know? What if they couldn't tell us anything? Worse, what if they could? "Hello, yes. This is Robert Harlow. My wife and I were at your hospital 23 years ago when our daughter was born. There was some confusion in the nursery, and we need to speak to someone about it immediately." Dad's voice was steady, but his grip on the phone was white-knuckled. I could hear the muffled response from the other end. Some polite yet disinterested hospital operator, probably wondering why we were bringing this up decades later. "They're transferring me," Dad muttered, pacing the room. I glanced at Mom, hoping she'd say something to reassure me, but she just dabbed at her eyes and looked away. Finally, after what felt like hours, Dad straightened. "Yes, I'll hold," he said, his voice clipped. Then, after another pause, "Hello? Yes, we need to know if there's any record of a mix-up involving our daughter's birth. She was born on May 4th, 2002. Yes, we remember the mix-up being addressed at the time, but we have reason to believe there's more to it." The pause stretched so long I could hear the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then Dad's face changed. His brows furrowed, his mouth tightened, and I knew. "Wait, can you repeat that?" he said, his voice cracking just slightly. The words came out in halting sentences as he repeated what he was hearing. "You have records of an incident. 2 babies, wrong identification bracelets. Both parents were notified but reassured no follow-up was done after discharge." My stomach turned. I felt like I might collapse. "Who?" Dad asked sharply. "Who was the other family?" Another long pause. Then he sighed, his shoulders sagging. "Yes, I see. Can you provide their contact information? No, I understand privacy laws, but we need to speak with them." When he hung up, the silence was unbearable. "Well?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "What did they say?" Dad looked at me, then at Mom, who was now clutching his arm like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "There was a mix-up. You were switched with another baby for about 8 hours before they realized it. They said both families were notified, but—" He trailed off, his face tightening. "But what?" I pressed, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "They didn't do any follow-up testing," he said. "They just assumed they fixed it." My knees buckled, and I sank into the armchair behind me. 8 hours. 8 hours was all it took for my entire life to be someone else's and theirs to be mine. "And the other family?" I whispered. "They've tracked down the records," Dad said quietly, "but they can't give us their contact information directly. They'll reach out to them and let them know what's happened. What if they don't want to talk to us?" Mom's voice was small, broken. Dad placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll cross that bridge when we get there." I wanted to scream. Cross that bridge? How could they be so calm about this? My real parents were out there somewhere, living a life that should have included me. And then there was the kid, my replacement. The air felt thick, suffocating. I stood abruptly, needing space, needing air. "Where are you going?" Mom asked, her voice panicked. "I just need to think," I said, grabbing my coat. I could feel their eyes on me as I walked out the door, but I didn't turn back. Outside, the night was cold and the stars were sharp and bright overhead. My breath came in clouds as I walked aimlessly down the street, trying to make sense of a world that had shifted beneath my feet. What would they look like? My real parents? Would they be like me? Would they love me as much as Mom and Dad did? Would I even want them to? I stopped at the edge of the park, staring at the empty swings swaying in the wind. I tried to picture another child sitting there, someone who looked like me but wasn't me, someone who had my life. Days passed in a blur of tension and half-spoken words. Every phone call felt like it could be the call, the one where the hospital told us they'd reached the other family. I lived in a constant state of anxiety, my mind replaying endless scenarios. When the call finally came, I wasn't ready. They agreed to meet, Dad announced at dinner, his voice careful, like he was trying not to scare me. The other family. I dropped my fork. "What?" Mom put a hand on my arm, her grip tight. "They're open to talking. Just talking for now." "Who are they?" I demanded. "What are they like?" "They didn't tell us much," Dad said. "Just that they're willing to meet at a neutral location. The hospital arranged it." Neutral. Like we were 2 warring factions coming to negotiate a truce. I couldn't decide if I was relieved or terrified. The meeting was set for the following Saturday at a local community center. I barely slept the night before, my thoughts bouncing between curiosity and dread. Who were these people? Would they be like me? Would I want to know them? When we arrived, the room was empty except for a long table and a few chairs. My parents and I sat on one side, waiting. The silence stretched unbearably. Then the door opened, and they walked in. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, with a serious expression. A woman, petite and kind-looking, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, and between them, a girl, my age, with dark hair that fell in loose waves around her shoulders. I couldn't stop staring at her. She looked familiar. Like a photo of myself taken in some alternate universe. "Hi," the woman said, her voice shaky. "I'm Maria, and this is my husband, Greg, and this is Anna." Anna, the name hit me like a punch to the chest. This was the girl who should have been me. "Hi," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm Elise." The introductions were awkward, stilted. We sat down, and for a moment, no one knew what to say. Then Maria broke the silence. "This is surreal, isn't it?" She laughed nervously, but her eyes were misty. 23 years, and now this." Mom nodded, her voice cracking. "We always thought it was just a mistake, a mix-up that got fixed. We had no idea." Greg cleared his throat. "It's no one's fault. None of us knew. But here we are." The conversation turned to practicalities, what the hospital told them, how they felt when they got the call. But I couldn't focus. My eyes kept drifting to Anna, who sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. She must have felt me staring because she looked up, meeting my gaze. Her eyes were the same shade of blue as mine. "How do you feel about this?" I blurted out, unable to stop myself. Her lips twitched like she wasn't sure whether to smile or frown. "I don't know," she admitted. "It's weird. I love my parents, but I guess part of me always wondered why I didn't look like them." My throat tightened. Me too. For a moment, it felt like we were the only two people in the room, connected by a strange, unspoken bond. After the meeting, the ride home was silent. Mom stared out the window, her face pale and drawn, while Dad gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. I sat in the back, my thoughts swirling. Anna, my biological parents, the life I might have had. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" Mom asked softly as we pulled into the driveway. I didn't answer right away. How could I? I wasn't sure how I felt. Confused, angry, sad? All of it, maybe. "I don't know," I said finally, stepping out of the car. "It's a lot." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the meeting in my head. The way Maria had looked at me, like I was something precious she'd lost. The way Anna had seemed both curious and wary. The way my parents had tried so hard to hold it together, even though I could feel their fear and pain. By morning, I was exhausted, but the questions didn't stop. "Are you okay?" Mom asked as I shuffled into the kitchen. "Not really," I admitted, pouring myself a cup of coffee. Mom's face crumpled, and I instantly felt guilty. "I'm sorry," I said quickly. "I don't mean to make this harder for you." She shook her head. "You're allowed to feel however you feel, Elise. This isn't easy for any of us." "I know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But what I didn't say was that I felt torn. Torn between the parents who raised me and the people who were supposed to. Torn between the life I knew and the one I'd never had. I couldn't help but wonder if Anna felt the same way. The first time I saw where Anna grew up, it felt like stepping into a dream that didn't belong to me. Maria and Greg invited us over a week after our first meeting. My parents hesitated at first, unsure if we were ready to dive in so quickly, but I wanted to go. I needed to see it, to see them. Their house was nothing like ours. It was a charming, sunlit home on a quiet street with a picket fence and a perfectly manicured lawn. It reminded me of the kind of place you see in movies. Maria greeted us at the door, her smile warm but nervous. "Come in, please. Make yourselves at home." The house smelled like fresh bread and lavender. Family photos lined the walls, Anna as a toddler on a tricycle, Maria and Greg on their wedding day, a younger Anna grinning with a gap-toothed smile. I stared at the pictures longer than I meant to, trying to imagine myself in her place. "Do you like lasagna?" Maria asked as she led us to the dining room. Mom nodded, her smile tight. "It's Elise's favorite." "Really?" Maria's eyes lit up. "It's Anna's favorite, too." Of course it was. Dinner was polite, filled with safe, surface-level conversation. Greg asked about my job, and Maria wanted to know if I liked to travel. Anna sat quietly, barely saying a word. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I put down my fork and looked directly at Anna. "What was it like? Growing up here, I mean." She blinked, surprised by the question. "I don't know. Normal, I guess. I had friends in the neighborhood, went to a public school. Nothing special." Nothing special, I echoed, glancing at the photos again. It looks like a nice life. It was, she said simply. Then, after a pause, what about you? I hesitated. Different. We lived outside of town, more isolated. I went to private school because my parents wanted to give me every opportunity. I laughed bitterly. I hated it, Anna frowned. Why? Because it was lonely, I admitted. I was the weird kid who liked to read and didn't care about cliques. I spent most of my time in the library. For a moment, she just looked at me, her expression unreadable. Then she said, I spent a lot of time in the library too. Something shifted between us then, a flicker of understanding. After dinner, Maria insisted on showing us around the house. Mom walked with her, trying to be gracious, but I could tell she was overwhelmed. Dad stuck close to Greg, making awkward small talk. Anna and I ended up alone in the living room. She sat on the couch, her legs tucked beneath her, while I stood near the fireplace, staring at more family photos. You're wondering what it would have been like, she said quietly. I turned to her startled. What? She shrugged. If you'd grown up here, with them. I didn't answer, but she must have seen the truth in my face. I've been thinking about it too, she admitted. What it would have been like if I'd grown up with your family. If I'd been you. You wouldn't have liked it, I said quickly. My parents are great, but it's different. They're different. Different how? I sighed, sinking into a chair across from her. They're intense. Everything had to be perfect. Grades, behavior, everything. They meant well, but it was exhausting. Anna nodded slowly. My parents are the opposite. They're laid back. Sometimes too laid back. I guess I always wanted a little more structure. We sat in silence for a while, both of us lost in our thoughts. Do you ever feel like you don't belong? I asked finally. She looked at me sharply. All the time. And there it was, the thing I hadn't been able to put into words. The sense of being out of place, of being someone who didn't quite fit. For the first time, I felt like someone understood. It's been a year since I found out the truth. A year since my life turned upside down, and I learned that the family I'd always known wasn't the one I was born into. Looking back, it feels like that first meeting with Anna and her family happened in another lifetime. So much has changed since then, but strangely, some things haven't changed at all. Anna and I talk regularly now. At first, our conversations were stilted, full of hesitations and careful words. But over time, something shifted. We started opening up to each other, sharing bits of our lives, our thoughts, our fears. She's become like a sister to me, though our bond is still new and fragile, like a sapling just starting to take root. My parents, my real parents, are kind and loving, but they're careful around me, as if afraid they'll say or do the wrong thing. It's hard for them, I know. They've spent years loving Anna as their own, and now here I am, a stranger who is also theirs. We're still figuring out how to navigate this new relationship. And my parents, the ones who raised me, they've been my anchor through all of this. They've reminded me that love isn't defined by biology or blood, but by years of shared memories, sacrifices, and the kind of bond that nothing can break. We've had to redefine what family means, all of us. It hasn't been easy. There have been tears and arguments, moments of doubt and guilt, but there's also been growth and healing, and maybe even hope. I visit Maria and Greg's house sometimes, and they visit ours. The first time Maria hugged me, she cried. She apologized for everything. The mix-up, the years we lost. I didn't know what to say, so I just hugged her back. Anna comes over often, too. She fits in with my parents better than I expected. Sometimes I watch her laugh with Dad or cook with Mom, and I wonder what life would have been like if things had been different. But I've stopped dwelling on the what-ifs. I've learned that life is messy, unpredictable. We don't get to choose where we start, but we do get to choose how we move forward. The other day, Anna and I went to a park we both used to visit as kids. It was strange to think about how close we'd been to each other without knowing it, living parallel lives in the same small town. As we sat on the swings, Anna turned to me and said, "Do you ever feel like we're living someone else's story?" I smiled. All the time. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we're writing our own story now. She nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. Yeah, I like that. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Family isn't just about blood. It's about love, connection, and the people who show up for you when it matters most. I have 2 families now, and while it's complicated, it's also beautiful. My heart is bigger than it used to be, stretched to hold more love, more people, more stories, and as strange as it sounds, I wouldn't change a thing.